When my wife passed away, her doctor called me 2 hours after the funeral and said, "I need you to come to my office right now. There's something in her file you need to see before anyone else does." Then he said, "Don't tell your son, don't tell his wife, just come alone." When I sat down across from him, and he opened that folder, I understood why he'd waited until the house was empty to call me. If you're new here, stay with me, because this story goes somewhere you won't see coming. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Hit that like button before we start. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. My name is Robert Halloway. I'm 67 years old. I spent almost 35 years running a small insurance agency out of a strip mall in Rapid City, South Dakota, before I sold the book of business and retired. I was married to my wife, Diane, for 39 years. This is her story more than it's mine. It always will be. The funeral was on a Tuesday, the 3rd week of March, at Kessler Family Funeral Home on Fairmont Avenue. There was still snow packed along the curbs, gray and stubborn, the kind that doesn't melt until it's good and ready. I stood in the front row in a black suit I hadn't worn since my own father's funeral 20 years earlier, looking at a casket, holding the only woman I had ever loved, waiting for it to feel real. It didn't, not yet. Diane had died 11 days earlier, a stroke sudden in her sleep. She was 60, too. The doctors said there was nothing anyone could have done, that it happened too fast for warning signs, and I believed them, because grief doesn't leave much room for questions. For 19 years, Diane had worked as the office manager for a family dental practice on the north side of town. Dr. Aaron Kessler's practice, not related to the funeral home despite the name. She loved that job. She used to say she knew where every file in that building was, knew every patient's kids' names, knew the whole rhythm of the place better than Dr. Kessler knew it himself. Looking back now, I understand exactly how true that was, and how much more she'd been keeping track of than teeth. About 60 people came to the service. Old clients from the agency. Her sister flew in from Arizona. Our son, Tyler, sat in the front pew next to his wife, Brianna, and I remember noticing, in the flat, far-off way you notice things at a funeral, that neither of them cried. Brianna kept glancing at her phone in her lap. Tyler kept leaning over, murmuring something low, the way people talk when they're managing a problem, not grieving a mother. At 12:20 that afternoon, right as the last guests were leaving reception at the house, my phone rang in my jacket pocket. I almost silenced it. Then I saw the name on the screen. Dr. Aaron Kessler. I stepped out onto the back porch, away from the noise of the kitchen, and when I answered, his voice was tight in a way I had never heard from that man before. "Robert," he said, "I need you to come to my office, today, if you can, to understand why that call frightened me the way it did. You need to understand who Aaron Kessler was." I'd known him for close to 20 years, mostly through Diane, mostly at office holiday parties, and the one time he sponsored her charity run for the hospital. He was not a man who rattled. Calm, careful, the kind of dentist who remembered a patient's grandkids' names off the top of his head. Hearing him sound unsteady told me something was badly wrong before he said another word. "What's this about?" I asked, standing on that porch with the sound of my own wife's wake carrying faintly through the screen door behind me. "Not on the phone," he said. "Come to the office, and Robert, listen to me. Don't tell Tyler, don't tell Brianna, not yet. I need to explain something about my family before I go any further, because none of what happens next makes sense without it." Diane and I had built a good, plain life on an insurance agent's income and an office manager's salary. We paid off the house on Larkspur Court. We had a retirement account we were proud of, built slowly year after year, the boring way. And we helped our son whenever he needed it, which over the last 2 years had become far more often than I like to admit. Tyler was 36, married to Brianna for 6 years. He'd lost his position at a regional logistics company back in 2023. and had been drifting between contractor gigs ever since. Always one deal away from turning it all around. Over the past year, he and Brianna had started coming around more. Sunday dinners turned into Wednesday visits, turned into Brianna offering, out of nowhere, to help Diane organize her paperwork and bills, since, in Brianna's words, "You two shouldn't have to keep track of all this yourselves anymore." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Diane hadn't either. Looking back now, that's exactly the problem. In the weeks before she died, Diane had mentioned, almost in passing, that she couldn't find some of our bank statements. She thought maybe she'd misplaced them during a cleaning spree. Brianna had started coming by on Tuesdays, always with the same reason, helping Diane set up online banking so it would be easier for her to keep an eye on things. Diane, who had managed a dental office's books for 19 years without so much as a rounding error, let her daughter-in-law walk her through it, because that's what you do when family offers to help and you love them. 6 days before she died, Diane asked me if I remembered signing something at the kitchen table back in January. Some kind of update to our power of attorney, in case anything happened to either of us as we got older. I told her I didn't remember any such thing. She frowned, said Tyler had mentioned bringing papers by for us to look over. Figured she'd simply forgotten. We let it go. We had no reason not to. The morning she died, I woke up next to her, and she was already gone. Quiet, in her sleep, no struggle. Nothing anyone could point to and say there. That's when it happened. The paramedics were gentle. The doctor at the hospital was gentle. Everyone kept saying how peaceful it must have been, and I clung to that word for 11 days, because it was the only comfort anyone had to offer me. Standing on that porch with Aaron Kessler, voice tight in my ear, all of it came rushing back at once. The missing bank statements, the paperwork I never signed. The way Tyler and Brianna had been circling Diane for months like they were waiting on something. "Aaron, tell me what's going on," I said, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry back through the screen door. "I can't explain it over the phone," he said. "Diane left something with me, an envelope. She dropped it off at the office about a month ago and told me only to open it if something happened to her. Robert, I opened it this morning, and what was in it? I need you to see it yourself. Come straight here. Don't stop at the house on the way, and Robert, whatever you do, don't mention this call to Tyler or Brianna." My hands were shaking by the time I hung up. I went back inside, moved through the last of the goodbyes without really hearing them, and told Tyler I had some paperwork from the funeral home to sort out, that I'd be back within the hour. He barely looked up from refilling his coffee. "Sure, Dad, take your time." Brianna didn't glance my way at all. She was already clearing plates in the kitchen, phone propped against the sugar bowl, texting someone with a small, satisfied set to her mouth that I hadn't let myself notice until right then. I stood there a second, watching my son's wife tidy up her mother-in-law's wake like she was closing out a shift, and that cold feeling from the porch settled deeper into my chest. I got into my truck and drove across town with my wife's casket still fresh in the ground behind me, with no idea the worst part of that day hadn't happened yet. Kessler Family Dental sat in a low brick building off Cathedral Drive, the kind of place Diane used to point out with quiet pride whenever we drove past. I parked around back, still in my funeral suit, my mind racing through every version of what Aaron could possibly need to show me. He was waiting in his private office, door already open, blind drawn. He shut the door behind me and locked it, which told me something about how seriously he was taking this before he said a word. He pulled a plain white envelope from his bottom desk drawer. Diane's handwriting was across the front, for Robert, not to be opened unless something happens to me. She brought this in about a month ago, he said, sitting across from me, instead of behind his desk. Said she didn't trust keeping it at the house anymore. Said if anything happened to her, I was to give it to you in person, and to warn you to be careful who you told first. My hands shook opening. Inside was a folded letter in Diane's handwriting, 3 sheets, front and back, and a small USB drive taped to the last page. In the letter, Diane wrote that she'd started noticing money missing from our retirement account, small amounts at first, transfers she didn't recognize, then larger ones, moved out over about 5 months. She wrote that she'd asked Tyler about the papers she didn't remember signing, and he'd brushed her off with a joke about her memory. But something in the way he wouldn't quite look at her made her uneasy enough to start quietly checking our accounts herself, the same way she'd checked a decade of dental office books without anyone ever having to ask twice. She wrote that she'd found a power of attorney filed with our bank dated in January with both our signatures on it, except she was certain she hadn't signed it, and fairly sure I hadn't either. She wrote that she'd started keeping her own records after that, quietly, the way you'd odd. It an employee you suspected but couldn't yet prove, because some part of her still hoped she was wrong about her own son. There's more on the drive, Aaron said quietly. Financial records, emails, Robert, I think you should sit down for this part. I was already sitting. The first folder held bank statements Diane had screenshotted herself, 4 transfers out of our retirement account over 5 months, totaling just over $61,000. Each one authorized using a power of attorney neither of us had ever signed. The money had moved into a business checking account under a name I didn't recognize at first, until I saw Tyler and Brianna both listed as authorized signers. The second folder held printed emails between Brianna and a man named Curtis Voss, a business acquaintance of Tyler's who ran some kind of consulting firm out of his garage, according to his email signature. In one message, dated 4 months before Diane died, Brianna wrote that the in-laws won't notice for a while, they don't check the account that closely, and once it's moved we'll figure out how to explain it if it ever comes up. Curtis had replied that he could help restructure it so it looks like a loan on paper, so that if anyone ever asked, there would be a document to point to. The third folder was the one that put ice straight through my chest. A screenshot of a text conversation between Tyler and Brianna that Diane had found on their shared family tablet, the one that synced messages across all our devices, the one Brianna herself had set up to make things easier. Tyler had written, "She's asking questions about the account again. We need to close this out before she says something to Dad." Brianna's reply read, "She won't figure it out. She's not as sharp as she thinks she is anymore. Just let her keep thinking it's the bank's mistake." I sat there staring at that screen, feeling something break loose in my chest I didn't have words for. My wife, sharp enough to run a dental office's books for 19 years without an error, being told by her own daughter in law that she wasn't sharp enough to notice her own son stealing from her. Aaron put a hand on my shoulder and told me Diane had come to him specifically because she trusted him, because he was the one person outside the family who'd known her long enough at work to understand exactly how careful and precise she really was, and because she was afraid that if something happened to her, Tyler and Brianna would try to control the story before I ever saw the truth. "She protected you before she was even gone," Aaron said. "Now we protect what's left." I asked him why he'd warned me to keep Tyler and Brianna away from this. He said it plainly. If Diane's suspicions were right, and the evidence in front of us said they very likely were, then this wasn't a misunderstanding or a loan gone sideways. It was a plan built slowly over months by 2 people who had sat at our table every Sunday while quietly working out how to explain away what they'd already decided to take. "We need this documented properly," Aaron said. "Not just what she gathered. We need bank records pulled officially and a lawyer who handles elder financial exploitation. I know someone. Her name is Marissa Cole. She used to prosecute exactly this kind of case before she went into private practice." Marissa met with us 2 days later. She went through the drive twice, quiet the whole time, then said what none of us wanted to hear out loud. "This is strong," she said. "The text messages alone show intent. and the emails show planning, but we need the forged power of attorney authenticated by a handwriting expert, and we need the full bank trail before we take this anywhere. If you're willing, Robert, going about your normal routine for a few more weeks, staying quiet, would keep them from getting nervous and moving anything further out of reach. I sat there, my wife, 11 days in the ground, being asked to go home and sit across the table from my son and his wife and act as though nothing had changed. While they believed they'd gotten away with something, they started planning while Diane was still alive to serve them Sunday dinner. It was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked of me. I said yes without hesitating, because Diane had trusted me with truth and I wasn't about to waste it. For the next 3 weeks, I did exactly what Marissa asked. I let Brianna bring over casseroles and ask gently, when I thought I might be ready to think about downsizing the house. I let Tyler pat my shoulder and tell me Mom would want me to take care of myself. Every night I went to bed sick to my stomach, and every morning I got up and did it again. Because Marissa told me the moment they felt safe was the moment they'd stop being careful. The bank's fraud department, working off Marissa's formal request, confirmed the power of attorney had been filed using a notary stamp that belonged to a woman who'd retired 18 months before the document's date. The handwriting expert confirmed what Diane had already suspected in her heart. Neither signature on that document was hers or mine. We decided to lay it all out at the reading of Diane's will, scheduled at our family attorney's office on a Thursday morning in April. Tyler and Brianna had no idea Marissa would be sitting in the room, or that a detective from the county's Elder Financial Crimes Unit would be parked outside. We sat down that morning, Tyler in a gray suit, Brianna composed and pleasant, both of them clearly expecting a formality before collecting what they believed was already theirs. Partway through the reading, I said I had something to add. I nodded toward the door. Aaron walked in first, followed by Marissa, and Tyler's face went the color of old paper. "What is this?" Brianna's voice came out sharp. "Your mother-in-law," I said, "is what this is." Marissa laid out the forged power of attorney, the 4 transfers, the emails with Curtis Voss, and read aloud in a flat and steady voice the text exchange where Brianna had written that Diane wasn't as sharp as she thinks she is anymore. The room went dead silent except for Marissa's voice, every word landing like a hammer. Brianna stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "That's not what it looks like. That's taken out of context. Sit down," said the detective, stepping in from the hallway, showing his credentials. "There's an active investigation into financial exploitation of an elder and forgery of a legal document. Anything you say from this point forward can be used against you." Tyler hadn't said a word yet. He sat staring at the table, and I watched something break in my son's face. Not innocence, because that had been gone a long time already, but the look of a man finally understanding there was nowhere left to go. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking, "it was just supposed to be temporary. We were going to pay it back before you ever noticed." I felt Aaron's hand land on my shoulder, steady, grounding me, because for 1 second the room tilted and all I could see was Diane at that kitchen table, quietly building her own case against her son because some part of her already knew what he was capable of and hadn't wanted to believe it. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Your mother sat at that table every Sunday for 39 years, making sure you had everything you needed before she asked for a thing for herself. I said, "And you spent the last 5 months figuring out how to take what was left." The detective walked them both out 10 minutes later. Brianna cried the whole way to the elevator. Tyler didn't say another word. "It's been almost a year now." Tyler pleaded guilty to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and forgery, and is currently serving a 2-year sentence, most of it suspended in favor of restitution and probation, since the money, unlike some cases Marissa has handled, was eventually recovered in full. Brianna took a plea deal on a lesser charge and is on probation, barred from any financial power of attorney for the next 10 years. Curtis Voss is facing his own charges for helping structure the transfers. I got the retirement money back, though honestly, the money was never really the point. Diane never got to see a dime of it. Returned, what she got in the end was the truth reaching me exactly the way she planned it to, through a man she trusted, delivered with enough care that it didn't destroy me on the way in. I still live in the house on Larkspur Court. Some mornings it's quiet in a way that used to hurt, and now it mostly just feels honest. Aaron Kessler and I have become close friends since all of this. Something neither of us expected. He tells me Diane used to talk about me at the office more than I ever knew, always certain I'd do right by her if it ever came to it. I set up a small fund in her name through the Community Foundation to help cover legal consultations for older adults who suspect something is wrong with their finances but don't know where to start asking. It's not much yet, but it's growing, and every dollar in it carries her name forward, doing something good, exactly the kind of thing she would have wanted. I think about that porch a lot, Aaron's voice tight on the phone telling me to come see something before it was too late to matter. My wife, quiet and careful right up to the end, making sure the truth would find me safely, even after she couldn't be there to tell it herself. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts, and subscribe if you want more real stories like this one. I'll see you in the next.